Hey, this is Drake here. I was playing some First Descendant. Not the type of game I'd usually play, but I've been playing it a pretty good bit and enjoying it. But watched a bunch of build videos and seen some people with some really great builds, but I hadn't seen anybody really explain the skill modifiers and skill attack power on here. And it's kind of confusing because they don't really apply the way they read in a lot of times. So I had been doing a bunch of testing here and come across some pretty interesting results. Let's get right into it now. The first thing that you want is it's kind of descendant. This is Lepic, of course, but it's kind of descendant based
This operation,
because
it's just wiping them all.
if your skill, as you see out to right, has a high modifier like this, his ultimate ability here has a skill power times 2760.3%. So that's a really high modifier. So adding a modifier to that, you would think would be really good. So if you added 50% modifier to that, it would give you 50% of 2700, but that's not the way it functions. It actually only adds 50% to that. So I'll equip it in a second. If you added 50% skill power to this, it would not give you nearly 1400 more skill power. It would only give you 50 more skill power modifier on it. So for an ability that has a high modifier, running skill power modifier is really just a waste of your investment. See, our grenade here only has a 585%, so you'd see a little more bang for your buck out of running a modifier on that. But for our main ability, which I've really been trying to spec into, running the modifier is really very minuscule amount of increase. Now the other thing to look at, and it gets kind of complicated here, as your base stats. All right, we've got our skill power, which goes through a base skill power boost ratio. And then you've got fire boost because we're fire based skills. And of course, this comes from Reactor. These two are just on a Reactor and doesn't benefit us at all. And we've got a tech boost because we're tech and dimensional, I believe. I have to look at it. But tech is the main thing we're looking at because, let me show that again. Go to Descendant, each one has two, as you can see at the bottom.
It's just wiping them all out.
Our ultimate is fire and tech. Our grenade is fire and tech. Our other are fire and singular. I said wrong earlier. And the way the game's kind of set up is your reactor, you can only spec into basically two of your abilities. So you're either going to have to run a fire and tech to get your ultimate and your grenade up, or you can run your fire and singular to up your other two abilities. You cannot get boost on all four at the same time. And that comes from your reactor. As you can say, your skill boost here is fire boost and tech boost. And each one of those gives a multiplier for our skills. As you can kind of see, I mean, that's why we have 7200 at the top, but our grenade and our ultimate are hitting for 14,714 because that's going through our multipliers. But here's what I've really found. And on this build, the most bang for your buck is going into skill attack, not skill multiplier. Because right here, your base skill boost ratio, we've got 73% basically. All right, what the majority of that's coming from is this mod right here. We're getting a 65% skill boost. All right, and the way that works, it does, and let me just remove it here, save that. Now we'll go back into our info, and as you can see, we're getting a 8% skill boost ratio right here. It does not go off base on this one. It actually adds 65% straight to it. So when you add that on, you get a straight 65% damage boost to your skills on this build. As you can see, we'll hit this guy with a grenade for 44,000. Now we'll add this one in for 65%, save that, and now we'll hit him again for 71,000. You get straight 65% increase for running that one mod. Now in comparison, we can also go ahead and equip, if I can find it, our skill modifier, one for skill modifier. I wish there's probably some way to search these. I just haven't figured it out yet. That's skill expansion. Here it is, technician. Alright, and this actually gives us a 30% modifier. But we can equip it if we have room. Alright, we'll have to remove. We'll take our skill critical hit off. And then we can put technician in. Save that. Alright, and now you can see same grenade. Whoops, sorry, it critted that time. We'll have to wait. That's the other thing we'll get into is crit rates. Oh, it crit again. We'll keep trying. We'll get one that's not a crit. Yeah, 75,000. So you're only getting a 4,000 boost out of running. How much is it? 30%. And I mean, you can do the math on it. 4,000 is not 31% of 71,000. That's because it's adding to the modifier. Now that even adds even less to our big attack because it's got so much higher of a modifier on it. So I mean, really, that for this build, now if you've got a low modifier, as I'll show on another character in a minute, it really helps a lot. But if you've got a high modifier, it's really not worth wasting your time. And I learned it for a long time before I figured it out that I just basically wasted my resources into it for what I wanted to do. Now the other thing I was going to go over is crit rate, because I was kind of confused on this. Now crit rate, if you can see, I got it maxed out and it says it gives you 115% crit rate, which by normal thinking you would think, well, I'm going to crit every single one. That's not the way it works, because you got another one of your little hidden features here. Alright, you've got a skill crit rate on each character, and it differs for character, it's not set. And you've got a skill kit critical hit damage. Sorry, I can't speak today. Alright, and what this is, you can see it's at 34.71% on my skills. We will unequip this, save it, and then go back in. And as you can see, our skill crit hit rate is 17.4%. And I think I've got another mod that's adding a little bit. But Lepix, I believe, is right around. But anyway, I think it's around 10% or 50. I believe it's 15%. But your doesn't actually add 115% to your skill critical hit rate. I can't speak for some reason. It actually just multiplies what's already there. So that's why it gets a little confusing, because some of them multiply what is existing, but other ones like base skill power boost ratio, they actually add the percentage straight to it. So if you get 100% skill boost power ratio, you get 100% more damage on your skills. But if you get 100% more skill critical hit rate, you only get 17% more bang for your buck. And also you have your skill critical hit damage kind of specs that way, because it's different. It goes by base. So we're base hitting at 39% increase on our skill critical hit damage. Now if we go back to our modules, and I have no idea where that thing is, but if we add in, well, I'm not going to look for it. Alright, but if I'm not going to spend the time looking for it, trying to keep the video short. Alright, but if we look for it and we add it in there, we'll actually get an increase based on our base rate. So if we increase this by 50%, it will not go to 1.8. You will not get a 50 point increase. You will get 50% of your base. So that's around 70. If you said 1.4, if you do 50%, you're actually getting a 70% increase. And if you get it up to 100% skill, it will double this number. You'll be getting like a 2.7 modifier on your skill critical hit damage, which is great. But I mean, you can only push your, it's really expensive to spec into crit and critical hit damage early. That's why I would say for early, because I've only got one catalyst on this build. I'm still, you know, my equipment's level 80. I'm not quite in game yet. but the grind for the catalyst and such as that is hard. So I would say, you know, if you're running this build, specifically best bang for your buck on skill damage by far is skill power. Now you could equip, and another thing is, see how it's battle labeled down here? This limits me from running something like this because it's battle labeled. I cannot stack these. As you can see, it'll say a module of the same group is already equipped, which that would be great because it's 12% more skill power, and it does a tech skill modifier too. And my skills are tech based, so that would be great. But since it's labeled as battle, we cannot stack these. And that comment limits you from, I mean, you've got other things like this Spear and Shield. It's got 8.1% skill power on it, but it does not, that part doesn't upgrade. The defense part of it upgrades, but the skill power doesn't, so you can't get much return out of that. And this is just skill hit damage and rate and stuff like that, and others just survivability. But yeah, I was just going to go over that, and I won't go too in depth on it. Weapons are kind of the same way. It's kind of weird how it functions, because if we go into our weapons here, our Thunder Cage, see, Thunder Cage has a 2%, a 2 times multiplier on critical hit damage. Alright, but if we add this in here for 56%, it ups it to 3.1 time multiplier because it multiplies the base, which is there, which is already 2. So for 50%, you're getting a straight 100% critical hit damage increase. But firearm crit hit rate is the other way around. You start out with 20%. If you add 10% critical hit rate to it, you do not get 10%. You get 2% because it goes off of base. So for some reason, some of them goes off of the base amount, and some of them just multiply what's already there. And of course, you got something like, they both kind of function the same because critical hit damage is so high that when you multiply it, it goes up quite a bit. But this one is so low that when you put 100% on it, you're only getting to a 40% critical hit rate at maximum. So some of them are just too expensive to spec into until you get really late game and you've added, you know, all the expansions and the catalyst to it to have it to where you have enough space to really spec into crit and get it as high as possible to see some really crazy damage numbers. But, and we'll swap to Bunny here.
Are you?
Or I don't really even have to swap, but you can see
shocked?
her main one, which is the lightning emission here. As you can see, it's got a different damage multiplier over here. You know, your lightning emission, your damage is skill power times 148.7%. So putting some more damage modifier on that would give you a pretty good yield because it's got such a low modifier. You know, and your continuous damage is only times 53.1%. So speccing into modifier would help this a lot more than it would anything that's got a higher modifier on it. And that's just what I found. It's like some of the skills go off base, some of them just add straight to it, and without testing it's just impossible to know which one is which. And you know, Kuiper's so hard to come by that investing your resources in the wrong mod really sucks, because it takes, you know, hours of grinding and reinvesting to get it back right again. But that's it. I just thought I'd put this out here because, like I said, I've seen a bunch of in-game build videos which are really nutty, but I've never seen really anybody really explain which skills function, which skills get the best results depending on what you're building. And from my experience so far, and I haven't learned it all yet, but that's the best end result depending on which character you're running. But that's it. Like I said, if you like the video, give it a thumbs up. If you want to see more, hit the subscribe button. If you have any questions, leave it in the comments. And as always, thanks for watching.